Hi you guys, it's Amanda with Healthy House on the Block here with another Healthy House tip on how we can create a healthier space in our home to support our bodies, our immune systems, and create a really healthy life for ourselves using our house as the building block. This week, I am talking about how to go through and detox each individual room of your house. So, this is a really good way to kind of start small and work bigger. It's a good way to just get a handle on one area of your house if you just want to do that. A lot of times people will start with like a bedroom, a kid's room. Kitchen is a big one because we spend a lot of time there. So this week's blog post is all about taking it room by room. I'm going to kind of walk you through how I start with my clients. And then I also have a download for you where you can use the same type of worksheets and planning guides that I use when I'm working with a client and we're doing things kind of room by room, step by step. So I'm going to take you through this week's blog post. I want you to remember, though, this is really important, that as you go through non-toxic areas in your home, you don't have to change everything at once. I think this is a really big misconception. I will tell you that my house is not perfect. We are still working on making progress at my house, and you have to be okay with that. You have to understand that you can't change everything at once. House takes time, home takes time. A non-toxic home takes extra time because there's extra planning involved. So creating stress around detoxing your house is actually just going to leave you feeling overwhelmed, and you're going to be in a worse off place than when you started. So I want to remind you of that when you're starting these detoxes for each room. So there's two ways that I kind of choose a starting point. It boils down to two main questions. The first is, what room do I spend the most time in? And then the second one is, what toxins am I coming into contact with on a more regular basis? So this is why a lot of people choose bedrooms. This is why a lot of people choose kitchens. We spend a lot of time in the kitchen. We spend a lot of time sleeping when you look at like the overall grand picture of our day. So it kind of will give you some insight into where you want to start, and it'll be different for each individual family. So think about those two questions. Think, where you're spending the most time. If you're, more focused on your kids, think about where your kids are spending a lot of their time. And then once you start changing, it'll just kind of keep snowballing, and then you can move to different rooms. If you're going to start with, whatever room, I like to kind of break it down into 3 steps. So the idea behind a non-toxic house is we need to address the climate of the house. So this would be like the humidity levels, the dust, the airflow in the room or the house. And then second is to remove toxic products from the home and toxic materials. A lot of times products are going to be easier to remove than materials. Materials oftentimes means that we're ripping something up, we're renovating something, and that's a large project, a lot of expense. So that usually comes later on. And then the third part of it is to replace the toxic products and materials, if you've chosen to do that, with natural products, materials with natural elements, things that are low toxin or no toxin. And I say this giving you the idea that both of these are very important. I have chosen in my own house to have some things that are low toxin, simply based on money, simply based on how the product will work for my family. Is it a durable product? And some things I have chosen to go completely toxin free. So it's okay. I mean, you're still making a better choice. And I think that's really important to remember. We don't need to stress about having things perfect. That's just not reasonable, in my opinion. So I know that these ideas kind of seem vague, but we're going to kind of go through each of these, and you'll see how each of them becomes like a little mini to-do list for your house. So in this week's blog post, I go through and talk about each of the toxins that have really high humidity. I will take you through that in my slides. And then I'm also going to talk to you about how to go through each individual room. So first you'll want to grab a piece of paper. do like a visual scan of the room. This is what I do with my clients. Open up cabinets, make a note of every single thing that needs to be changed. It's kind of like what people call like a brain dump. Like you're just getting it all out of your head. You're writing everything down on this sheet of paper. You can use the workbook that I have that you can download as well. And I usually start in one corner and I move my way over and go through the whole room. Once you have your list, you're going to break it down into sections. So the first would be like very small things that you could change immediately. This might be removing dust, might be raising or lowering the humidity. It might be improving the airflow of the room. It might be moving out a piece of furniture that we know is not going to be the healthiest. So these are the things that we can do right away. Second would be things that are easy to replace, easy to remove. Candles, air fresheners, big ones. Very easy to remove. You can replace it with a diffuser. You can order it off Amazon. You could have it in 2 days if you wanted. Maybe changing out vinyl blinds with cotton drapes, just things like that. We're going to start thinking about these things. And so once you start with like the smaller items that are easier to change, you'll gradually get to the bigger items. It might be a piece of furniture that you're actually going to replace. It might be getting a non-toxic rug to go over the carpet in the room. It might be replacing the carpet in the room with flooring that's more healthy. So you want to just go through each of these things and kind of break it down and categorize it and make a list from smallest to biggest. It's going to make it much easier to pick and choose what you want to do. And then I also want you to remember that even if you decide not to do something, or honestly in our case, so one of the things that I've talked about a lot on here is flooring. We finally decided to bite the bullet, get the flooring that we wanted, and it was a really long process of planning, of saving, of deciding what to get. I mean, we've lived in our house for over 5 years, and it just was one of those things that it took us a long time to do, and that's okay. We made other changes in the meantime, and we knew that that change was coming. We know that more changes are coming that are even bigger. So you can't get frustrated and stuck on the things that you're not going to change. I think I talked about this a couple weeks ago. Just keep moving forward. So let's go through the slides. We'll talk about the toxins that are in each room that we want to pay attention to, and then we'll talk about how to really break this down into a step-by-step process for you. So let's get started on this room by room detox. We're going to talk about cutting out toxins through a step-by-step process. We're going to get organized, and this is kind of how I go through rooms with my clients, and I'm going to take you guys on the same process. So the first thing is, let's ask some questions before we start and decide what room we want to start with. So there's 2 questions. The first is, what room do you spend the most time in? And it can give you a lot of insight. A lot of times, if you think about it, it tends to be our bedroom because we're sleeping there. It could be a kitchen because maybe that's a place where your family congregates. It might be a home office. It could be a living room. Think about where you spend the absolute most time. That's a great place to start. And then second, what toxins are you coming in contact with on a daily basis, if not multiple times per day? This would look like plastic food containers. We're coming in contact with that every day. Something you put on your skin, coming in contact with that multiple times a day, probably. Perhaps it's carpet, perhaps it's a chair, something that is upholstered, your mattress we come in contact with a lot. So think about what you come in contact with paired with what room you spend the most time in, and you'll get a pretty good idea of what room to start with. So I have a 3-step formula that I use when I'm helping a client, and that's what I'm going to take you through today. So the idea behind these non-toxic areas is this. So first we need to address the climate of the room through the humidity levels. We want a humidity level that is between 35 and 40%. You can get something like a little device on Amazon that can help you determine your humidity levels in a room. If you have a smart thermometer, that's a good way to do it. Then we want to look at the dust. Dust contains toxins, dust mites. If it's a room that gets really dusty, bedrooms tend to get very dusty because we're physically in there a lot. We want to address the dust levels. And then finally, we want to address the airflow, meaning, does this room get fresh air? Do we push the air around with a fan? Are vents covered up? Do we have a fan that actually vents outside. Maybe it's a laundry room or a kitchen or a bathroom. So we want to address those things and make sure that fresh air is coming in. The second thing is to remove toxic products and toxic materials. Now, if there are products that you can just remove, say a candle, say a plastic container, do it. If it's something you need to replace, then we're just going to have a little bit longer of a road here to try and get all of this done. Toxic materials can be very tedious and time consuming to remove, but you can do it. It just takes a lot more planning. That's something that we did in our house. We ended up replacing the toxic laminate flooring, or vinyl flooring rather, with a more natural Green Guard laminate. And it was a process. It took a lot of work and it took a lot of time and a lot of research, but we ended up doing it. And there are other things in our house that we'll do that with as well, but it definitely takes more planning. And so the third piece of the puzzle is to replace those toxic products with natural ones. It might mean buying silicone snack bags and getting rid of your plastic snack bags. It might mean switching to a green cleaner, just all kinds of things. You might opt for a new mattress. These are all your choices, but as you go room by room, you'll get to decide and make a list. So let's talk about the health effects of home toxins. The first one is high humidity. This isn't necessarily a toxin, but it is something to address within your home. High humidity has a tendency to not only grow mold at a faster rate, but then there's other problems as well that we'll talk about. For starters, we know that any home with mold is a home that can affect our bodies on a variety of levels, both mentally and physically. The other thing is there have been studies that have linked high humidity levels in homes to higher levels of off-gassing of formaldehyde from indoor materials. We know that formaldehyde is a carcinogen. It's very toxic to our bodies and our health, and so we want to avoid that. A home that has high humidity levels also generally has a higher level of allergens, pathogens, other just irritants to our bodies. And then other studies have actually shown that high humidity levels just leave you with an unwell feeling kind of sluggish. It potentially could be from allergens irritating the airways and causing that body fatigue, or it could be an increase in dust mite population. But some researchers also think it's just the high levels of humidity. And so let's take a look. So the next toxin we're going to talk about, and again, it's not really a toxin, it's dust and dust mites. Many items in our home produce fine amounts of dust. Upholstery, carpet, rugs, drapes, pillows, they all hold dust, and they also hold dust mites, which can create a feeling of irritation due to an allergic response. Dust mites thrive and reproduce in humid environments, so it's anything over 40%. And even if you kill them, if you don't remove them, you're still going to suffer that allergic response. And then dust also contains toxins. So it contains formaldehyde, PVC, PFOAs, anything that is like an airborne particle that can be kind of left in a dust form. They all contribute to body burden. They all contribute to endocrine disruption and potential increase in cancer. Kids who are around a lot of dust generally have an increased risk of allergies and asthma as well. Plastic toxins are another thing that we want to look at in each room. Plastic contains so many different types of toxins, including phthalates, polyvinyl chlorides. Both of these contribute to hormone disruption, as well as neurological toxicity in kids and adults, and then abnormal reproductive development. Pretty much any plastic in a space, whether it's your kitchen containers or your kids' toys, is concerning at some level. And I do have studies for all of these claims in my blog post this week. So let's go on to chemical cleaners. This is another thing that we use probably on a daily basis, multiple times. The problems with chemical cleaners are due to a list of various chemicals, fragrances, and additives. Not every product has every chemical, fragrance, or additive. So we have to do our research, but they contribute to liver problems, thyroid issues, diabetes risk, cancer risk, hormone production problems, and then immunological problems, suppressed immune system. So we need to do our research, be very careful of things that look green. I would check them online and make sure that they really are healthy may not always be free of every chemical and fragrance or additive in a company's opinion. So that's called greenwashing, and it's really important to just double check things beforehand. And so then let's talk about furniture, because most of our rooms have some type of furniture. Furniture that is upholstered contains PFOAs, oftentimes PFCs. These are linked to liver toxicity and cancer in adults and children, higher level of risk in children because they're smaller. They also have formaldehyde in the foams and in the adhesives. It's a known carcinogen. It's been linked to long-term hormonal effects, and so it's something we want to avoid. And then there's also flame retardants. Flame retardants have been linked to neurological development issues, as well as it's a known hormone disruptor. So let's take a look at what I have for you guys in this week's blog post. It is the step-by-step room detox. It is going to go through a few checklists. We're going to do a room-by-room master schedule so you can plan everything out. It's going to give you some checklist ideas for some habit changes, cleaning changes, and then product changes. You're going to be able to then write that down on your own into a task list, and I'm going to help you go through and organize it. And then I also have like a toxin removal quick list. So just you can give your room a visual scan and just jot down things. That's a really helpful way to start it out. So that is available in this week's blog post. You can download that. So this is how you can go through each room yourself. You can either use the workbook that I've provided, or you can just grab a notebook. So first, grab a pen and paper or your workbook. That's going to be step 1. And it's the simplest way to go about like these issues to getting your house to be low toxin. So look around the room. I start in a corner usually, and I work my way completely around the room. Look up, look down, open drawers if you need to. Quickly jot down the items that you know for a fact you need to change. Things that we've mentioned in this post, things that you've heard about before. You can also make a little list and put a question mark next to things where you're not sure. Maybe I do need to look into this. From there, you can go into the workbook and organize the list into groups based on the ease of change and what type of change it is. So my workbook has like categories that you can put each thing into, or you can do it yourself and just kind of organize it into sections. So you would take like the smaller items and put them in one grouping, things that are really easy to change, things you can just get rid of right now. It might be candles or other small things that you wouldn't even notice if you didn't have. And then would come like medium, changes. It might be a bigger piece of furniture. And then the last thing would be like flooring, things that are very difficult to change. So obviously, here we go. First, cleaning and removing dust and moisture from the room. Second, changing habits. Third is going to be small items, and then large items, and then long-term projects that you want to do to the space. And I have a section in the workbook for that where you can plan ahead on those things. And that's it. So you can go through each room by yourself with this list, or you can use the workbook that I have, and it's linked in this week's blog post. But either way, it'll give you a good idea of how to start with each particular room in your house. All right, you guys. So that's it. That is this week's blog post in a nutshell. You can go to my website and download the workbook that I have created for you. It's based on what I use when I work with my clients to detox their homes or detox a particular space of their homes. So I invite you to download that. If you have any questions about detoxing a room or you want to get started detoxing a room, I do virtual consultations. And if you're in the Twin Cities, I can meet with you in person. Otherwise, I will talk to you guys next week.